Welcome everyone to day 2 of hashtag #ANewReality. This is our Quickfire session, and our first speaker today, we'd like to welcome Peter Weyand from the Australian Catholic University, and Peter's going to be talking about building 360 video interactives. Thanks, Peter.
Good morning all. I'm here just to talk about what we're currently doing at Australian Catholic University. I'm an educational designer with the Learning and Teaching Centre there. We are very much in the early stages of interactive video, 360 video, and I've got a couple of implementations to show you. Our aim with the 360 video is inclusive of simulations. We want decision making by our learners, we want engagement, and particularly analytics. We want the analysis behind it because we want to determine how to improve the design and development of our interactives. The same sorts of technologies we've seen and been using yesterday, and I'd actually like to put a plea out to all the participants here. It would be very useful if you were able to tell us as a forum what video cameras you're using and why, because I've heard of a lot of good technologies around, but I'm not quite sure what's the motivating point behind it. It'd be useful if we had a forum where we could all put the pros and cons of the technologies that we favour, so that the newest amongst us who are yet to implement the technologies would be able to make decisions, informed decisions based on the community. So again, we're using Unity 3D. That's the primary tool to build the interactives, and I'll go into that why. Things like the Vicon are used at the more upper level, and we have dedicated spaces for those. The reason that we're interested in the 360 video is to make authentic learning experiences. And I've been approached by some academics who have the issue of, we have students that go to prac teaching. That opportunity is becoming less and less. It's harder to find schools and environments that they can practice in. Is it possible that in addition to those experiences, we can create a simulation of some sort that will allow these students to make an interactive or make a learning experience around that we can post-analyse afterwards? And I believe 360 video provides us one of the alternate ways of doing that, which is pretty low cost and pretty low impact, and that's the nice thing about 360 cameras at the moment. Similar things with work experience. We can see opportunities to create scenarios that would emulate what students see at work. We've developed at ACU an MRI system, which is electronic medical record systems. It's currently being trialled with Sydney University and University of Technology Sydney in conjunction with us. And I can see that it would be useful at some stages to integrate 360 learning experiences within what they're doing, whether it's in applying medications or whatever, because we have these great environments. ACU is a university where we have a lot of nursing students, paramedics, and we also have a lot of teaching students. So we have these beautiful labs set up that they do simulation training in, and we can see and they have, and I forget, it's a BMAX system, I forget the name of it, Beeline, thank you, where they're taking camera shots within that environment from different angles and streaming it, but it's didactic in the end, because all it is just monitoring what's happening. It doesn't allow interaction with the environment. So we're thinking, well, these beautiful 360 cameras, if we make something where the student can actually design the learning experience along with what they've done, then we can use that in other years. We can use that as source and prompt materials for other students. So the trick is the interactivity, and that's what I want to talk to you about. We want to be able to interact with objects in that 360 video world, and we want real objects to be able to interact with that in the more advanced cases. The important line is at the bottom. We need to be able to record students' responses. We need to be able to measure and evaluate, and the feedback is very important. And the recording is one of the reasons we're using Unity, because we want to pipe that information out to our databases. So we want to be able then to run analytics across it at the end of it. And we just use Unity PHP back to our databases to do that sort of thing. Using 360 video as a stimulus. So if this is a very early iteration of the project, and as I say, we're at the very early stages of implementation here. We're designing the interactives, and in this particular one, a student, once the video is recorded, actually has zones that they can allot a learning activity to. And the learning activities we can use are simple things like labels. You can just label things that happen within it, but you can add quizzes to it, you can add video or audio to it. And what happens is when the video plays, and sorry, I don't have it here to show you, but when the video plays, the student literally drags around the zone to keep over that particular person. What that means is that when someone walks in 3D space, you're not putting a static hotspot, but the hotspot will follow the person through your 360 video space. And you can have anything attached to that you would like, so that you could be posing a question. An example would be, let's use our nursing laboratory that we've got. Let's use our simulation ward, and let's set up a scenario where there's a whole lot of aseptic technique failures within it. And we ask the student to go through and identify by exploration what the aseptic failure is, what the breach in the aseptic technique is, and to be able to give us the remedy. Well, what is the solution here? What should have been done? And of course, that information is then all recorded on our databases so that we can evaluate later. And we often do things like a peer-to-peer type learning, but in an anonymous way, where you can see what another student has said, and if you disagree with them, you can actually send them a prompt back through the database. It's not synchronous, it's asynchronous. Next time they come on, there's a couple of notifications. Oh, by the way, person XYZ, anonymously, has said, why did you do this? Didn't you think of A, B or C? Or congratulations, I didn't see that, well done. And so it allows our students to interact with each other. So it's the monitoring, the responses, the feedback, the analytics that are important. That was a simple implementation. The more complex implementation is, as Daniel is demonstrating here, is the hockey stick. So in this environment, the 360 video is used as the source. So this is our high-performance athletes we talked about yesterday. So the performance of the athletes is demonstrated out in the oval. So they set up the 360 camera. They have these athletes that are able to do certain things, and we set up the scenario whereby they have people that might simply be passing the hockey ball across from one to another. And in the scenario, the aim is going to be for the learner to be able to anticipate where that ball is going to go by looking around the 360, using that peripheral vision we talked about yesterday, looking where the body motion of the player with the ball is. Is there something that's indicating where that ball's going to go? And then we're asking our student, in this case, to be able to intercept the ball. So it uses a similar sort of idea. We haven't got very far on this, but we've got the scenarios, we've got the tracking being done on the hockey stick using the HTC Vive tracker. We've got the Vicon system around that can actually put Daniel into the environment if we wanted to, and we've got a virtual hockey stick in the environment. If we now post-track, when we shoot that video, a 3-minute video, we can now put objects over that ball like we did with the zone, and we can actually have the rays being cast in Unity to show where that's going to go, and we can look for an intercept of the virtual hockey stick with the ball. So the trick might be anticipate where that ball's going to go and block it in the line. So that's a far more advanced use of 360 video than we're going to necessarily give our students, because the aim with the previous example, the virtual laboratory, so they can run it on their devices, they can run it on their computers. There's no headset required. This one requires a headset. The virtual person needs to see the 360 video and the virtual objects and the real objects and be able to map the learning experience all together. The question that we're sort of posing is, well, Unity's great for everything. As you know, I'm a big advocate. Computer vision can be built into Unity, so can we track things like those balls or those people rather than the person having to do the zone? Can we introduce computer vision technology to allow that to happen? How it all works is pretty straightforward. You're all familiar with how 360 video works. There's a 360 sphere, which the video is mapped to. So what we do is we put another sphere inside that sphere. And so that now means there's And we have it when the student drags around the zones for the learning experience. Notice I say students because my aim is that students create these resources wherever possible. The academics are busy enough. They really don't want to do this. But if someone can create something that they can use for later teaching, then that's be an excellent outcome. So the student or the learner drags around an object around this 3D sphere, and we record its position, its 3D space, and also the frame or the time that it occurred. So that's recorded in the file either on the computer or in the database. So that when that happens, when it plays back, it just uses that data, so that object is always in real space. Quickly to finish, that's objects being tracked around as people walk through that environment. But quickly to finish, lots of things to be done. Dynamic sizing of zones. We need editors for the resources, the quizzes and the labels and everything else that they're doing. Editors for the zones, computer vision, AI, and WebGL version. Hopefully it'll come to mobiles. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter. Does anyone have any questions straight away for Peter? No, not interested in how... Oh, yep, what?
Peter, you said these resources are more for the students. Do they engage with them quickly? I mean, obviously, I can imagine the academics are probably going, oh, too hard, but the students obviously grasp them quickly because they're learning them in schools, or just your opinion on that?
Yeah, we find the students are just inherently available to this technology. To them, it's just another tool, another challenge for them to do. We don't find they take long to learn this stuff, but we haven't done a lot of research with it just yet. But anecdotally, and even back in high schools, we find the students, this is inherent to them. You know, they're just used to working in this environment in their gaming field, and to them, this is nothing particularly new. So yes, we find our students find this another useful alternative.
With Unity, are you using any specific plugins or just Unity out of the box?
Unity, yeah, most of the Unity plugins, Darryl, are freely available. So the HTC Vive has a plugin for Unity. Vicon has a plugin for Unity. All the stuff that you see with the zones and the spheres, there are so many good examples of 360 video implementation in Unity. That's a stock standard one we had for it was a courtyard in Canada, and it's got a 360 video. They set up the rigs and the cameras and everything for you, and you can then, and we're just adding our own zones and our own spheres and our own things to it. It's all VR based, that particular one. It was designed for it. So when you move your gaze to a particular place, it will now take you to a whole new video and a whole new set of learning outcomes and load that in. So Unity has, everyone's producing plugins for Unity. As I say, the Vive, everything else is there. So nothing particularly unusual.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Now, don't run away yet. I've got 2 words for you, I think. Creative Commons, Peter? Just a consideration for later.
I think it's a great idea. Absolutely.
Yes.
No argument from me. No
Fantastic. Please put your hands together and thank Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And... Oh, thank you. And while I'm doing this, I'd like to welcome Mr. Hugh Gormley to the stage. Hello, Hugh. Get rid of that, Hugh. And Hugh Gormley is one of our own here at Learning Futures, and he's going to be talking to you today about our experiences, Griffith at the Commonwealth Games, where it's hard to believe it was only last year. Exit out, or cross out. Yep, mouse. Mouse.
Okay, and there's the button says.
Yep, and you HDMI?
So far, I've had to give up a lot of things.
Thank you, Hugh.
Yeah.
Microphone.
It hasn't really been a sacrifice for me as boxing's allowed. The wonder of technology. Practiced this at home last night, and it was in full 360. I could tilt my iPad everywhere and see our presentation. But today it's decided that the over-under would be better for us to see. For the Commonwealth Games last year, we at Learning Futures got involved in a marketing piece. Very, very last minute. And it was interesting because we managed to learn a lot about making 360 video. Oh. No, I must need the next slide. What did Griffith at the Games? Good English, Hugh. Good English. Sorry about that typo. Let's move on. Okay. Start again. For the Commonwealth Games last year, we got asked by the marketing to get involved with making a piece of 360 video, some immersive media for the marketing exhibition. Griffith was one of the sponsors of the Commonwealth Games, and they employed an agency to come up with a whole bunch of experiences for people to come and get excited about Griffith. This is what the marketing agency came up with. And it was a tent down on Broadbeach, and it had, I think, about 350 people come and visit it at it. Now, I don't want to put down what they did, but we also had this red box, which was a shipping container that our colleague Brad Harrison outfitted for marketing, and it's portable, and they just didn't know what to put in it, really, at the end of the day. It had 5,000 visitors to it over the week and a half of swimming. A lot of those people, it was their first time ever experiencing anything in terms of immersive media. So, marketing came to us, I think 6 weeks before the Games, and said, what can you do? And we said, we'll put 3 headsets in there, and we'll give a seated experience of kind of what it's like to maybe be an athlete at Griffith. Students had been asked to produce something before that, and they came back with a whole bunch of athletes just training, and there was no narrative or anything around it. And moreover, they kind of missed some of the basic principles of how to shoot 360. For example, there was a nice big shadow of the camera on every field. So it kind of destroyed the illusion a little bit. The guy recording was standing in the background on his phone, you know. So there's someone training on baseball over here, but you know, if you turned around, the fourth wall was kind of blown apart. So that's kind of the end result. Was there's people queuing in between swimming events and diving events to come and have a go. Now, we knew that people were going to be seated, and we didn't want them bumping into each other. So we thought about how do we design this video. And essentially that's what it is. We used some of the old techniques of trying to put together a narrative, and we were well aware of the kind of common logic at the time, which was in 360 you don't edit, you don't move the camera, and you don't do transitions, and you definitely don't do all these different things. So we went, I think we'll see what we can do. So our first step was to actually plan and give marketing a pitch. So, like I said, we got together a narrative, and we tried really hard to communicate to them that 360-degree video is a very different beast. What they wanted to do was to get athletes to come and stand in front of the camera and have someone on the other side interview them. And we kind of went, well, that's just going to end up with people doing this as they listen to the question and the answer. And so we said we really want people to take in everything that's around them, but also to not bump into each other. So we went to audio being core narrative. And the location that the experience was, i.e. this shipping container with 3 people in it at a time. So if someone didn't want to do any more of the experience, they could take the headset off, pass it to the next person, and it didn't have to be reset. That was second. We had a definite preference for frame rate over resolution. We feel that kind of frame, like whilst high resolution is really important, high frame rate gives you a more immersive sense. You stop seeing that flicker, and always then you've got, even though we could only play back at about 60 hertz, we recorded at 90 hertz or 120, I can't remember, so that it would be future-proofed a little bit, that footage. We also used the action camera that goes along with it, its little brother, because we decided we were going to shoot underwater in 3D, two of them together. We also decided to do some special effects. So we needed a floor-to-ceiling green screen. So Griffith Film School came to the party and they lent us their studio. They had one day available, and of course we turned up and everything went wrong. This is old Muggins here going, what the hell do I do next? So we went down to the Immersive studio where you've been today. It was still a photographic studio, and we used some camping tiles from Bunnings in bright green. They're $12 a pack, and they will make you a very serviceable green screen for 360 filming. Okay, we had some significant challenges when we went on to location. This is a gym we turned up to for our weightlifting athlete, and it was very open plan. There was actually nowhere to hide. So Brad and I were hiding in the ladies' loos, monitoring on the Wi-Fi our picture on the iPad. When we went to the boxing gym, there were mirrors. 270 degrees of the way around. So you'll see here we aligned the camera with this spar in the building, which then a boxing ring is sprung. So our boxes started to move around, and of course then the camera moved around. But luckily they're sprung in quadrants, so we could put it in one quarter, align it with just this mirror, and it was just this sweet spot where we kind of got away with it, and then he could spar and it wouldn't move the camera. This is one of the best ones. You wouldn't see it, but you've got a field and it's completely empty for the most part, but if you need to go and give those girls some instructions on how to go up to one end of the field and run down, you've got to run from the clubhouse down to tell them. So we learnt for next time we'll bring a walkie-talkie with us. That would be really handy. And we had some really bold ideas around shooting underwater, and they didn't really work out in the end, because the one thing that we didn't foresee was, I've forgotten the name for it now, but it's basically parallax error because of water bending, effectively acting as a distorted lens. So where the two shots from the action camera joined up, they were much more bent, and so there was a really noticeable seam. But we also tried putting two cameras together on a rig that we 3D printed and submerged them, and it would have worked, except for this distortion then allowed you to see the neighbouring camera. We learned a lot of stuff, and I'm just going to fast forward very quickly to kind of the end, and just talk about editing in a mouthful. It's really good that we just followed Peter, because he was talking about getting people to look in the right space. And remember, we had these in a shipping container and we didn't want people to bump into each other. So in the design, in the editing, we made sure that every shot that had any movement in it, it might leave you looking. If you start here, then you're looking to the left, then the next shot would start here, and that shot would have either no movement in it, preferably no movement, but then the shot after it would then move you back to the centre or then over to the right. And that we then started to get quite confident with it, and we realised, with things like the boxing, that our athlete was here boxing, and in the next shot you just caught enough movement out at the corner of your eye to make you want to turn. And so we tried all these different things. We had one shot in there that made people turn the whole way around because it was our weightlifter. We'd kind of tied ourselves in a knot with a shot that it was empty. So we composited 4 versions of the weightlifter around the camera and then used sound to pull the viewer around. So as she picked up the weights, chink, there was a loud sound of the weights moving together, and that would pull you to the left and then pull you around so that you came back to the start, and then the next person put the headset on and they were already facing the beginning again. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You passionate innovator, you. I think that's a really nice example, actually, of experience design and the use of narrative and how important that is to any experience, learning or not. Let's face it, whether it's for entertainment, whether it's for getting to know people, or whether it's identifying with the subjects themselves as well. Any questions for Hugh? Long as they're not long and technical. Do those later.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hugh. Sorry. All right. I'd like to please welcome Dr. Darryl Clare from... Oh, God, did I do this 2 days in a row? Darryl. Thank you so much. And Darryl's going to be talking about using 360 video to create interactive branching scenarios, which we love, to prepare distance. Thank you.
I was going to say, because I am really loud.
All right,
All
everyone,
right.
please welcome Darryl.
Thank you very much. I'm going to talk really quickly because I've got 26 slides and about 13 videos, but I think I can do this. I had a bit of a change of heart last night. Oh, no. Turn it on, maybe. And change the presentation a bit. I've got so much out of listening to other people, I thought it was really good to share some of the experiences, how we're doing stuff, and what we're doing it with. So that's what I decided I want to do. Now, a little bit about me, not that I'm really that interesting, but I give you a bit of perspective. I call myself the most unacademic academic there's ever been. My first nearly 20 years of life was in industry. And then I decided to get into something different, and I spent nearly 20 years with St John Ambulance, and I did every job. There's about another 6 roles I haven't put in there. Ending all that, I went to the university, and I brought on to specifically build a paramedic program aimed at industry, aimed at distance, to feed into our undergraduate degree. And that's where I'd been working on lots of innovative ways, I hoped, in technology. A lot of it in the past has been with apps. But when 360 video came out, I got really excited about it. On top of that, I've done a lot of volunteer roles, and I think that's given me opportunity to try and train masses. I've been the state superintendent for St John, looking after about 1,500 volunteers, and currently look after all our vocational education and training in the Scouts in Queensland. So, at CQ, we've been developing over, I guess, about the last 18 months. A team was formed mostly of technology staff and a really annoying academic who wouldn't leave them alone, so they eventually asked me to come along. And that's okay. We've now expanded and we've got our learning and teaching people coming on, which is really great. So we've got Nadine and Colette here, and I'm learning a lot through that as well. We started a community of practice, and it's been one of our most successful communities of practice. We get 70-odd people at it, and at the end there's an email address. If you want to jump on, you're always welcome. We have Zoom meetings once a month. And we're sharing, and we're lots of interesting things. We're using material now in several disciplines across the uni. Some key principles: we put the pedagogy before the technology. There's a lot of people who want to do 360 in the uni, but there's no real need for it. Sometimes it's other ways that'll do it. Yep. Material must enhance the student learning. And equipment we want to make available to lecturer level, academic level, so they can use it themselves. And that's one of the things I've been doing, how to make it academic proof, I guess. Main projects, the themes have been inductions, familiarisations, situations that are rare events, that's one of my favourites, scenario-based activities and immersive tutorials. So this is the first one I ever did, and I'm going to talk about the cameras as I do this. This was with the old HD, the one that looked like a golf ball. I took 4 friends to the park and blew them up. The concept behind this, triage, is something that paramedics fortunately in Australia, don't have to do mass casualty. And we tend to talk about it. We give case studies where they read it. This put a little bit of information in. They could actually make a triage call based on that information. So that was the 360 Fly camera, only the HD version. But you get the idea. And then other people said, let's see what we can do with this. The next one I did was quite interesting. We have forensic students, and this is a crime scene. So this is how you branch through that. I always put a bit of a disclaimer up. They get this without the dots to start with, and they're looking around and saying what evidence would they collect and what scientific tests would they do to analyse it. And Colette did all that was the first time I worked with Colette. She did all the pictures, didn't you? I know. And we had the best policeman. We had a forensic policeman come and set it up, and he had such a sense of humour. I remember he had all his gear, and he had the UV special light, and that was our residential college for the students. I said, oh, can we have a look? And he said, no, I've been a university student myself. We're not getting it anywhere near here. Okay. There's even a body in the toilet, as you do. Yes. So, but you get the gist of what we're trying to achieve there. Okay. Then our science people said, could you do inductions? Like, you know, where's the exits? Where's the safety stuff? So you got up here, you can go look at, this is the emergency shower. You can read about the emergency shower, what to do, how to use it. And these are all done. I progressed here to a Samsung Gear, the one that looks like a white mushroom. Okay? Pretty good camera for its day, eh? It was excellent. So you get the gist of it. I was quite surprised when I found they weren't cocktail glasses. Yeah. Then I wanted to get into video. This is my Garmin. Some of you went for the ride in the ambulance yesterday. If you this afternoon haven't, come for the ride. You actually feel so immersed in this, you're in the ambulance. You actually tend to move with it. We're doing a couple of things here. We're teaching how to do the assessments, what they need to do, but we're also role modelling the behaviours. Paramedic students aren't great, and I think most students aren't great communicators, and health people need to be good communicators. The Garmin was a real game changer for me, the Garmin Verb 360, and I'm going to talk real quickly so I can show you the camera at the end and go through it. One thing I do want to show you, I usually don't show this because it really shows how bald I am here, but the Garmin allows you to augment layers over the top with things like anything from altitude, angle. You see what angle I can get an ambulance at. It's quite impressive. But this one here, when Paul's talking through an induction, this is what it's like to work in an ambulance. We got the roughest road in Cairns, and you'll see it start in a minute, and that's all I want to see here. You'll actually see, we actually measure the kilometres. So that added extra to the student is, while they're in the ambulance, I'm going 75 kilometres. This thing feels like it's about to fall apart, which it does. Our ambulances aren't the best, but no ambulance is really comfortable. Hence why I'm hanging on for grim death. But you can see how that is great. In glasses, it's really immersive. Not everyone likes glasses. That's quite okay. Throw it in. iPad works really cool as well. All right. This can be a little bit confronting. I should have given the warning first. This was where I'm heading with the triage. This is 13 people spread across 7 rooms. Is that my makeup skills too? I have a makeup kit that will rival anyone's in the world here, ladies. But the colours aren't quite good. So this is a choose-your-own-adventure type. Now, triage is about not treating. It's about categorising. This one should go first, this one should go second, and that. You can see the gist of how it works. When you're in a headset with this, it is really, there's people screaming as you would, and it's just not a pretty situation. But then triage is in a pretty situation. We're very fortunate. We're never going to usually get mass shootings like this in Australia. And that's where this is a big thing for me with paramedics. And I often give the statistics. How many times do you think a paramedic in, say, Queensland would do CPR in a year? Or a cardiac arrest? The stats say about 1.7. So even a skill like that we can lose. All right, so I progressed a little, and you shouldn't look at it as a technology by itself. This is 360 video. Our guys wanted to do this, and I said, you don't need 360 video. Colette's done you great video. And they said, we want it more immersive. And I said, okay. And they're right. You're a third person in this scan. But I didn't like the quality of the scan images. So this is where tools like Adobe Premiere come in. I actually took the live feed out of the ultrasound machine, and then Adobe Premiere has this beautiful planed sphere, which you can actually shape that up to the sphere so it comes back as a plane. I'm sure that didn't make sense, but you get what I mean? It turns a curved thing to a straight thing. And it works great. And I just recently, last week, had to work with our chiropractics. And they don't have anything that scans, but they said, we'd like to get different views at different angles. So I said, well, let's try this. You can see the young man here. He's one of the students in his final year. He's doing an examination on that lady there. Here's another student. But we put a GoPro on his head, and we fed the GoPro image above it. So when he does some of these things, you can actually get a secondary view of what he's doing. Does that make sense? Exactly where to stick the second image, I'm not really sure yet, but I'm playing with that. But I think stuff like that offers a lot of options and opportunities as well. All right. This I wanted to show you for an experience. You know, you saw that I do a bit of scouting stuff. I had some kids who couldn't abseil. We can take kids in wheelchairs abseiling and all that, but kids that have just got too many disabilities or injuries, we can't. So I had a couple of kids who wondered what it would be like. So I got this young girl, strapped a camera on her head, and when you put this on, it's one of my favourites for immersiveness. You watch people get, you know, really nervous because you're actually climbing the 18 metres, then you get to jump off it, which is really cool. We won't watch the whole thing. The whole thing's only 3 minutes. That's why I got her to do it. It'd take me 27 to get to the top of the ladder. When you get to the top, you can actually look down and you can see me at the bottom there in a chair with the iPad. It's quite good. So, yep, she's coming up to the last level. So 6, 12, this is the 18 metre level. And this is done, I do either third person or first person. I'm starting to move a lot to first person with VR because look at this, you know, you're getting exactly... I was a bit asleep having my coffee last night. I should have panned down with the camera, which you can in the headset. Okay, how long, about a minute? Yeah. Okay, cool. You get to see what it feels like. You actually feel like the edge going over the edge of the actual tower and dropping the 18 metres. So if you get a chance this afternoon, I've got about 5 Oculus Go's. Go for an abseil with me, okay? And yeah, I'm down there somewhere. I'll stop it there because I've got to keep going through a couple of things. That's the mount I used. My boiler making days come in really handy. I can mount a camera anywhere, okay? That was what Jim was talking about yesterday. He didn't do it justice to how clever that man is, you know? This is paramedic students with 60 cents worth of plastic and a phone app can do airway management. I'll skip this. I wanted to talk about the workflow in a branching scenario, but if someone's really interested, I'm starting to get into branching scenarios and the way to workflow them, where the video goes and what happens. I wanted to quickly touch on this and I'll get out of the way. Cameras, I think I've tried every one of them over the years. The Garmin is my preferred. The Pro's, rugged, it's waterproof, big lenses, onboard GPS and sensors, incredible quality video and images, good in low light, good stabilisation. It needs good quality cards. You put a cheap one in, it just doesn't work. It eats through batteries. Get about 4 of them and just cycle the suckers. And if you're really up close, think about your stitching. Like in the ultrasounds, I stitched first in the middle of the person, looked awful. Stitch on the curtains, no one notices. The Insta360, if you're looking for a good entry-level camera, that's the 1X, the newest one out. Really incredible, 24 megapixels if you're going to do still stuff, amazing. Stabilisation, not as good as, say, the Garmin, and low light, not good. Oculus Go headsets, the main things we use. The software, and you'll make this available to people. Yes. Yeah, 2 things, great. Pano 2 VR, brilliant for building these. Your Premiere Pro, and look at Adobe Captivate, because it's brand new with the 360. You can port the material straight to PhoneGap, which is Adobe product, and spit out apps, which is excellent. And thank you very much. Sorry?
Stay here for a minute. Thank you so much, Darryl. I think it's so fantastic actually to see that theme of social good coming through the use of immersive, as well as the learning context, of course. So do we have any questions for Darryl? We've got time for maybe one. No? Cool. Looks like you are off the hook, my friend.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. Please put your hands together for Darryl. guys? Where are all these innovators? We need new clips for these wireless microphones. Thank you so much. All right, up next we've got Alicia Eames, and Alicia is with Griffith University as well and part of the Guava community, which is great. And today Alicia's taking us through Beyond Reality, cinematic spatial sound in 360 film. Thanks, Alicia.
Thank you. Hi. I am with Griffith University. I'm about to start my PhD, which is very exciting and also terrifying. So what I'm talking about today was actually my honours project last year. I'm also a lecturer at SAE. I'm part-time lecturer over there, kind of my half job. The rest of the time I'm a sound recordist in documentary and TV, so film industry. And my family all think it's very glamorous. They think it's like this photo, which is the Logies. So I actually had to do it in like a full dress and heels and everything because they have like a red carpet. Yeah, it's like dress code. But most of the time it's not very glamorous at all. That was actually really cool though. That was like in a prison in tunnels. But constantly in the rain or covered in sunscreen, very sweaty. This is when a cameraman made me change the tyre when we were out bush because we got a flat tyre in the middle of nowhere. And mostly it's just carrying a whole lot of gear around. That's the majority of my job. A couple of years ago, I worked on a VR project, a commercial VR project, and just kind of fell in love with the possibilities of sound in VR. I love sound. It's such an incredibly powerful tool in film, and in VR, the idea of having like this spatial soundscape that works around you just captivated me. I was instantly like intrigued. So I eventually came back and did my honours year last year working in spatial sound. If you haven't, who has used spatial sound in their videos? Like some of the guys were talking about using it. Yeah, and it's really cool. Like you actually get surround sound in a regular set of headphones. Like you just plug normal headphones into your phone, you get surround sound, which is awesome. And the tools and the software and stuff is getting like way more affordable and a lot more accessible. So Facebook invested a ton of money a couple of years ago, like a ton of money, and they bought this software that used to cost a fortune. And so now anyone can download it for free and create these spatial soundscapes in like an audio program. And the audio program's free as well. So you can actually do spatial soundscapes for 360 video totally for free now, which is great. From my film side of things, so George Lucas famously said that filmmakers should focus on soundtracks because if they're the best they can possibly be, that's where you get the most bang for your buck. And I think that's really true, and I argue that that's really true in virtual reality as well for that sense of immersion and also just for a whole bunch of different stuff like showing the user where to look because they can look anywhere. Sorry. I triggered that a little bit early. I am going to show you some of the research that I did last year, and it'll just take you through a couple of little snapshots, but my paper has a lot more info in there, so there's like a workflow. So if you guys are looking at getting into spatial sound, it's got like a workflow for how to do that for free. I did it on like a really old MacBook Pro. You don't need a spec'd up computer. You can do it really cheap. So yeah, I'll just try and trigger that again.
Humans
Cool.
process sound as a task, which means sound often goes unnoticed by audiences, which makes it an incredibly powerful tool in the hands of filmmakers. The creative decisions a sound designer makes to include or exclude atmospheric recordings and sound effects, and the way they manipulate those sounds with EQ, reverb, and other effects affects the way an audience perceives the film. Sound can set the mood and change the meaning of the scene before you even see anything on screen. I've recorded a dodgy street scene on my iPhone as an example. But we can't just take cinematic sound practices and dump them into virtual reality and expect it to work the same. The perspective of the audience has totally changed. They're now in the story, they can look wherever they want. The way they perceive what is happening in the film is just distinctly different. So the question is, how do the principles of cinematic sound translate? What can we borrow and what needs to change?
Is it loud enough?
I started working on a project with Dr. from the Conservatory of Music at Griffith University, who works in the field of ecoacoustics or environmental acoustics. Her project was looking at creating a virtual reality experience incorporating ecoacoustic sound art using scientific field recordings of microbat echo emissions.
The topic seemed like a great match for what I was wanting to look into, so I decided to create a standalone project, a sound-driven 360 film about microbats. Afraid of the Dark is the story of a little girl who's afraid of these weird clicking noises outside a window. Those weird noises are the sounds of microbats echolocating, and the film takes her point of view as the microbats transport her from a place of fear and uncertainty in a bedroom, out of a window, and on an awesome flight over the city.
The shadows seem to creep across the room like some living thing. Can you hear what he can hear? I couldn't either. At first.
As a part of my research, I looked at some other environmental 360 films, Conservation International's Under the Canopy and My Africa, and the Emmy Award-winning 360 documentary Collisions by Lynette Walworth. To develop case studies on the sound of these three films, I got in touch with the sound designers who all graciously agreed to interviews. Joel Dueck from Under the Canopy has been working in immersive sound since 2006. Roland Heath from My Africa is the director of Sound Disposition, a London sound design company, and has filled many roles throughout his career from production to post-production. Thom Myers from Collisions is a three-time Academy Award-nominated sound designer from Skywalker Sound in Los Angeles, with a career spanning 5 decades and including credits from Star Wars, WALL-E, Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, and many others. These interviews, an interview with the Brisbane Virtual Reality sound team from Cutting Edge, and my own experiences from producing Afraid of the Dark, come together in my research to start to give sound practitioners a way to adapt cinematic sound practices for immersive media. I asked Thom Myers about how he approached sound design for the 360 film Collisions, where he fell on the spectrum between creative, emotion-driven cinematic sound and realistic sound. And this is what he said.
There's kind of the literal truth, and then there's the dramatic truth, or the truth for the story. Try not to get too hung up on everything being literally accurate, because sometimes when you do that, it doesn't feel either emotionally or dramatically accurate. You know, in some regards, I think the literal stuff is either overrated or there's something greater than that, and it's the story and the idea that you're trying to tell.
I think the most important part of my research finding lies in considering sound for a 360 film from the very beginning of the project. In my interview with Joel Dueck, he spoke about our natural human tendencies when it comes to sound. And this is what he had to say.
I take a page out of my neuroscience background to usually tell sound people we have to make our peace with the fact that sound is always an afterthought. It's just the way our brains are wired. Because it's subliminal, it's not a conscious thing that we do. We also don't remember to do it. We don't remember to budget for it, and schedule for it, all those things. And we push our way into even concept level meetings. Say, you don't know that you need us, but trust us. Just have us there. We can help. You know, we can help you figure out really creative solutions to some of the issues that you face in 360.
The main thing we think about and talk about when we think of usefulness of spatial sound in immersive media is how we can use spatial sound to guide an audience through the experience. Because the audience can look wherever they want, they often miss crucial pieces of action without some sort of guidance. Some films have used blatant techniques like animated arrows to direct attention, but with spatial sound we can be a little subtler and less obtrusive.
In 360, the user has total freedom. They have agency, right? They have free agency. So for the director, they can't have the same level of control over what the user is seeing and what they're choosing to look at. But sound becomes one of those very big tools that we can use in the form of attention directing. And we can use it subliminally. We can get people to turn around, and then they can see something there that the director wants them to see. So we can re-establish a form of influence.
By concentrating sound cues in the direction we want the audience to face, or by using sound cues ahead of the action, we can direct the audience without them even noticing it is happening. This was true in Afraid of the Dark, where we used a dog growling sound effect and the bat sound effects to guide the audience around the space. This is just one short example of my research findings. My paper is called Beyond Reality, bringing a cinematic sound approach to the development of immersive audio for an environmental conservation 360
And it goes into a lot more depth, from production design to location sound recording considerations to the software plugins. It covers a lot more info. It also includes some tools for 360 filmmakers, like a spatial sound workflow and a spatial sound talk template for on-set sound recordings. The insights from the interviews were incredible, and full transcripts are included in the appendices of back paper. From like an education perspective, like if you're using your videos to train students, there's like so many applications for sound for setting mood and emotion and stuff. Like the Paramedic videos where you were using screaming sound effects and stuff, using some of those sound effects in there to actually increase tension in students and put them under pressure, so they actually have to operate under pressure is like one example where you could use that. Or if you were doing a health application, then you need people to relax to really get into it, then you can use sound to actually help people relax. I'm not a neuroscientist, but if you're interested in that sort of stuff, Dr. Seth Horowitz has done a lot of work in the whole sound and how it relates to people's mood and emotion and stuff. He's got a really good book called The Universal Sense. Very approachable, very readable. I love it. Talks about like tadpoles, hearing apparatus and stuff, but it is actually really cool to read. If you're interested in that sort of stuff, I totally recommend that book. So.
Sure we are, Alicia. Let's put your hands together. That's fantastic work. All right, looks like we've got a question already, because this area is one that's under-acknowledged, as you can imagine, at this stage of immersive technologies and implementation, but so imperative. Hello, Justin.
Good morning. Sorry I missed the start of your presentation. I've actually got some ex-students of mine that work up at Cutting Edge at the moment too, which is great.
Cool.
I'm just curious, I'm from a visual effects and 3D background, and in the last couple of days the Sundance Film Festival has wound up, and Disney released one of their first features there called Cycles in VR, which I've been dying to sort of have a look at. So I'm just curious what you think about the space of VR movies in these kind of festivals appearing more and more, and where that will head.
Yeah, well, I don't feel qualified to really say, to be honest, but I haven't ever experienced VR in a long format. Like, the most I've done is 18 minutes. I don't know about you guys. I love VR. I love feeling like you're in the space, and I think there's totally applications for it where it's really, really powerful. So the guys at Cutting Edge did Inside Menace, which somebody talked about yesterday as well, which is yeah, and so that sort of application is amazingly powerful. Yeah, sorry, I don't even have an answer for that question. I'm sorry. I produced like a short film. Mine was 4 minutes long. I'm sorry, that doesn't help at all.
No, that's brilliant. So if it's okay with you, we'd love to include a link to the paper that you've written and that fantastic little video. And I'm sure people would be very interested in some of the templating and workflows that you've been speaking about as well. So I'm sure it will all go to good use. Alicia, thank you so, so much. Please put your hands together for Alicia for sharing.
As well, it's probably only relevant for another month or so because all this stuff is happening so fast, but it is there, so.
Thank you so much, Alicia. All right, I would like to welcome up to the front Andrew Patterson, University of Auckland, with examples from teaching business and negotiation. That sounds serious, Andrew. So we'll just get you hooked up there.
So I can keep a track of what I'm doing.
Now, is anyone else here, just while we're getting that one ready, is anyone else here working directly with sound? I mean, we've seen, yeah, you are. We've seen a couple of examples already this morning, and it's really interesting, I think, that it's coming out in the 360 sort of sphere of work instead of the VR kind of focus we had yesterday. Would you like to tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So we're working on a music therapy project where we're getting people to sing online in real time over the internet while in virtual reality. So our focus was to improve sort of health outcomes for people with spinal cord injuries. So that's where we're focusing our audio efforts at the moment.
Fantastic. So you'd be pretty interested in some of this research, I take it? Fantastic. Yeah, I can see lots and lots of applications for this coming up. All right.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. You are on.
Hi everyone, nice to see you. My name's Andrew Patterson. I'm a professional teaching fellow in the Department of Management and International Business at the University of Auckland Business School. About a year and a half ago, I tend to have conversations with people beside the coffee machine in the kitchen, and our IT manager Jerry said, "Hey, we're getting this VR gear," and I thought, well, that's really awesome, that's fun. How the hell am I going to use that to teach organizational behavior, and in particular negotiation? So I thought about it for about a year or so, had some conversations with people that had done some good stuff in the area. I didn't want my applications to be gimmicky at all. I wanted to somehow use it to create some sort of meaningful experience or meaningful learning experience for the students. So over the course of about a year or so, I came up with the idea that, well, I want to teach negotiation with this technology if I can, if it adds value to what I'm wanting to do. And I thought, well, having studied and practiced negotiation in various forms for a few years as an employment advocate and various other forums, I thought, well, I learned quite a lot through observation. And the research actually shows with experiential learning, observational learning in particular for negotiation has really good learning and knowledge transfer. So good outcomes from that training. So I thought, okay, well, I'm trying to capture reality here. I'm not a tech guy at all. I grew up in an environment with my father who is a computer and broadcast engineer. So if I needed anything done, I'd just ask my father. And I just wanted things to work at the end of the day. So I thought, okay, well, I'm not dealing with a computer-generated environment. I would rather capture reality and have students or people observe a negotiation to see what they can pick up on, because it's a very interpersonal process. Often you go into a negotiation, you've done your preparation beforehand, so you know your target points and your resistance points, your strategy, your tactics, how you're going to communicate with the other party. Then often what you find out is you get into the room and you realize that the other party is as prepared, if not more so than you are, as intelligent, if not more so than you are, and perhaps has a different approach than what you might be anticipating. So I was really fortunate to get a couple of professionals to engage in a negotiation simulation or a role play. I don't know if you've done one of these before, but if you're in the role play, you kind of identify with that particular character. People take it really seriously. So I wanted to capture the emotions of what actually happened. I set up the negotiation really, really challenging for the participants, basically to make it almost impossible to reach a deal. And what actually transpired was I interviewed them beforehand for a few minutes, and I asked them what their approaches might be, and they both said, I want to be cooperative. This is the manner in which I'm going to communicate with the other party. And then within a minute and 15 in the negotiation, one of the parties says, hey, well, I've essentially got a better offer on the table. I don't really need to be here. And you can observe the entire dynamic changing from that particular conversation. I thought, well, that's great. I want to use that as a teaching moment in the resource that I actually have. One of the challenges I faced was that I got them to negotiate for 17 minutes, it was about 25 minutes or so. All up, I had 40 minutes of video footage. But one of the challenges was crafting that into a digestible narrative to be used for teaching purposes. So I had to try and retain the integrity of the negotiation, but cutting out some of the stuff that doesn't really add value to the learning experience. So I wanted the experience to be organic, unscripted negotiation, capturing some of the nuances of interpersonal communications and some of the tactics and ways that people communicate with each other. And I think I captured that reasonably well with what I did. It's not perfect, but that's okay. I had a proof of concept that I launched in class last year, which I'll show you shortly. Okay, so I had an agenda slide. I thought I'm quite chatty. If I have an agenda slide, I can spare 10 minutes just on this. So I'll just flick through. Basically, I'm going to tell you about what I'm doing, what some other people at the University of Auckland are doing, and then I'll take some questions as well. This is basically what it looks like. It looks really simple. From a non-technical person, it took me quite a wee bit of time to figure this out. So I was based in the building at work. We've got a landlord on the left-hand side, so it's an office rental negotiation. Landlord on the left-hand side, tenant on the right-hand side. We have a Tongan landlord and a Serbian tenant. I wanted to try and capture some cultural differences with communication as well. They are both given 20 minutes to prepare for their negotiation, and then I leave them to it, and they have a wee talk. If you look closely down the bottom here, I noticed, I think it was Darryl mentioned earlier, the use of overlays with the 360 video, so the sphere to plane or plane to sphere. I was able to use that as well in this case, I think to reasonably good effect. So as the observer, what you're able to see is if you look down, you can see the deal options that the negotiators have. So you're essentially a fly on the wall. you're observing the negotiators at head height. You can look down and see, well, Sissy's negotiating her orange against her apple, for instance, or she's trying to log roll against each other. So you can look down, look at that, and then look around the room. That's the overlay that I had. There were 2 iterations of this. I had a 17-minute video for assessment purposes for 212 students last year. I had 38 headsets that I lent out to students who then had to do a team video presentation. Another iteration I did about 4 days ago now. I just had 2 issues and a 9-minute video. So it was just actually used for teaching purposes more so than assessment purposes. Just had a little QR code to make things easy. You're welcome to scan that and have a wee play if you want to. I can make the video public, but only for today. I just need the permissions from the participants because it's quite a personal process that they go through. So I can't, unfortunately, make that public, but I can for students on a semester basis. I want to try something. These are my headsets. I've seen some cardboard ones today, some plastic ones as well. I was able to source the ones on the left from Kmart in New Zealand for $10. I'm currently in talks with another company to try and get sponsorship for those ones on the right-hand side. I figured it might be easier to get about 200 headsets and chuck a company logo on there. And I think there's one company in particular that is reasonably, or they've expressed an interest to help me out with that as well. I'm going to try something. I'm not too techy, but I want to see if I can make this thing work so you can see what the experience is actually like. From the student perspective. Okay, is that showing? If it's not, I've only got 3 minutes 46 left, so I can continue.
Stop the clock. No, sorry, HDMI.
That's okay, don't worry about it. You get the idea. You can have a wee look. I have another session a little bit later on, so if you're wanting to explore what that actually looks like, we've all experienced, I think all of us have experienced 360 video before, but the idea is that you can look down, see the payoff schedule, and then you can look around the room. You get a sense of actually being in the room there. So the 2 iterations last year, I had 212 students. I took a lecture. It's funny, when I launched it, everyone was really quiet and everyone turned up, strangely enough, in week 8. They were like, oh, we're doing something different, which I thought was quite nice. I had the lecture, then I lent out the headsets. There was a 17-minute case study that they had to watch, and then I asked the students to complete a team video presentation assessment task on that, where they had to determine what went wrong with the negotiation because no deal was reached, what would they do differently, and then craft a team video presentation on that. A few days ago, I've made it into a class session rather than just an assessment piece, so a short, about an hour lecture or so, a 9-minute immersive video with the headsets on. One of the benefits is that if students don't have headsets or they don't have the right devices, they can just use the 360 video on their tablets and have a wee swipe with it as well. So it's not exclusive, it's inclusive in the approach that I took. And then I ran a negotiation simulation to see, so they've experienced that negotiation role play or that recorded negotiation. Then they put the newly developed skills into practice, and then they reflect on that and debrief. And here are some notable data that I have from, there's about 100 responses I've had so far. I'm just experimenting with this. I felt as if I was in the room with the negotiators. 80% of them said that they felt that they were in the room with the negotiators, which I thought was really good. It's what I'm trying to capture here. It's not just about the didactic principles of negotiations. It's about the empathy and how you communicate with people, what it feels like to be in the room, to try and raise the stakes a little bit there. I understood the emotions of the negotiators. 90% of participants, they said they strongly agreed, or somewhat agreed with that statement. Self-efficacy, so the session I ran a few days ago, I asked them before the lecture how confident they are in their ability to negotiate effectively. It was 54% at the outset of the class. A few more times throughout the class I asked them, but ultimately after the class, 90% of them said that they felt more confident, or they felt confident in their ability to negotiate. Interestingly, after I got them to experience the negotiation video, their self-efficacy rate dropped off a little bit. It might be because they thought, oh man, this is actually what people actually do. But then I got them to do the role play themselves, and then their confidence levels bumped up after that as well. Also, they said that they felt more prepared for what to expect in a real-life negotiation, so 87% of people said that. They enjoyed the video, 84%. They enjoyed the class, 97%, and they enjoyed the assessment task. That's fine. I'm more interested in the learning outcomes from this and whether they actually gain some real value from that. But as we all know, lots of our performance measures are on satisfaction levels. So this looks good if I need to present it to anyone at work. So That's what I've been doing. Really quickly, what others at the University of Auckland Business School have been doing, we have Michael Ream from the Department of Property and Deborah Levy, who's the head of the Property Department. They've been doing this for a little while now. They were the first at the Auckland University Business School to launch VR stuff. They're using it for doing property tours and taking people to places where health and safety statutes, regulations would otherwise prohibit you from being able to access these particular areas, and also doing little tasks where you walk around a room and find some stuff. There's also some people in the Department of Information Systems and Operations Management doing some really awesome stuff in augmented reality. I don't know too much about that, so I can't share any more. I want to say hi to my father because he's actually watching online. Hi, Dad. Nice to see you. I told him, oh yeah, say hi. Also, he's going to love it. I don't know if he has Twitter, but I asked him to post a message on Twitter as well if he wanted to. That's basically it. Hashtag a new reality. I've never done that in my life, but hey. Where to next? Hey, if you want to know what I'm up to, have a conversation with me afterwards. You're welcome to add me on LinkedIn or send me an email. And thanks everyone else for sharing as well. I'm learning heaps from a non-tech person trying to experiment with VR and sound. This is really, really cool. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
No worries.
And, I don't want to take your shine either, but hi, Dad.
It's Barry.
Your dad's Barry.
That's
Mine's
right.
Vince.
It's getting personal.
So anyone else's father beaming in today? No? Very exciting, isn't it? How old's your dad?
He's great, thank you. Yeah, he's fine. Yeah.
How old is your dad?
He
Just
is
out of interest?
68. He's
right.
retired.
Mine's 84.
Wow.
So there was no end there to the interest for this stuff, let's face it.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for your talk. I thought it was really interesting to think about how it raises capabilities.
Sure.
And then the one capability that we don't always think about when we think about technology is actually resilience.
Yeah, that's true.
Fascinating aspect to it. Thank you
Great,
so
no
much.
worries.
Everyone, please put your hands together and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I done?
Jason. Get you set up. And next up on our schedule, we've got Dr. Jason Zagami, and some of you might have met Jason, and we did hear from Jason yesterday as well. But because he knows so much, we've asked him to come back. Give it another go, please, Jason. And Jason's going to speak to us today about 360 live streaming, mixed mode, tutorials and workshops. Oh, thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you, Jason. I will leave you to it.
My apologies. Got the G off my
I'm feeling now like our institutional security is at risk. and we should be standing in front of the screen while we actually do this. We've heard a lot today too about people actually doing research on the ground and in institutions themselves. You're okay. Can we get a sense from all of you guys who's actually involved in doing research at the moment into VR, AR, immersive technologies? Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay. Do you think is there any one particular place that you would expect to find this type of research that people in the sector could actually access? Or do you figure we just publish it as normal practice? I'm just asking because I'm getting a sense that perhaps there's a need for something or somewhere that we as sector representatives and people who work on an institutional level to try and make this work with our student cohorts and for many other use cases as well, whether or not we might consider that as we go forward. But maybe it's just food for thought. Has anyone got any thoughts on that? Does anyone know of any great repositories? Kevin Ashford-Rowe. Thank you for joining us.
I certainly don't know of any specific places, but I do know that, you know, if you look at, for example, EduCourse, out of the US, admittedly, they're running a whole host of articles and, you know, there's regular updates. I think that it's, I think one of the interesting observations is that there's an awful lot of work that's going on, but it's somehow, we haven't quite jumped this technology into the mainstream as yet, and so it's interesting to explore that. But I think that it needs to be seen as an educational technology and educational affordances, and maybe that's part of the challenge, is that at the moment it's still a bit too much seen as a technological solution as opposed to an educational one, and so the conversations around it tend to sit in that technological place, and I think it would be better served if we could find places to put them in that more educational space.
I think we've got some work to do on the Australasian sector, don't you? Anyone else have any thoughts about groups or communities that you might actually know of that already are maybe curating this type of stuff and presenting?
Maybe, I mean, there's a lot of conversation obviously on Reddit about people who are trying new things with it. Maybe not very academic, but a lot of discussion happening there. Yeah.
Interesting. So some people are going to Reddit, you know, and just to find those articles because it is a collective at the very least. But it's an interesting proposition, isn't it? So if we were looking on a global scale, are we finding ourselves going through lots and lots of articles or different types of publication articles, when in fact what we really want to do is find somewhere where it's broken down for us so that we can find the pedagogical alignment, Kevin, or we can find the actual technical affordances and information that we need at that stage as well. So I'm just going to let you all mull that over, and maybe we'll all talk about it again in the very near future. And if anyone has any ideas, I mean, there's always, you know, the ACODE forum is a good place, or even come and have a chat with your representatives within your own institution, and perhaps we can talk about that sort of thing then.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'd like to reintroduce Jason Zagami. Thank you so much, Jason.
My apologies for that. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is just some experiences with using 360-degree in tutorials and lectures, but going through briefly the experiences over time with these technologies building up to this. At the university, like many others, we've got our lecture capture system, which captures the slides and syncs that with the audio of the lecturer. So fairly limited in terms of the experience, in terms of all of the activity that's actually happening in the lecture theatre. So for a number of years, I was using these various first-person view cameras to give an experience to students streamed online of what I was seeing. Of course, doing a lot of active learning and Q&Aing with students and having students doing activities during the lecture period weren't being captured or experienced by the online students if they only had the view of the screen, of the PowerPoint screen, and the audio of the lecturer. So that worked well for a while, but the big thing was around audio and being able to get audio from the groups and share that rather than just being the presenter audio. So at the time they didn't have the throwable mics available in Australia, so I was trying to make my own with beach balls, with mics in them and so forth. But eventually I've come up with the solution around the karaoke mics, which have built-in speakers. And so I've got half a dozen of those. They only cost about $10 each, and they're distributed out to the students, and they can just speak into those and distribute the audio. But then the students wanted to also be able to see me. Now, I didn't particularly want to be able to be seen, but building upon the success of the TED Talks and all that, also started then streaming a video stream from my laptop of what I was presenting, and also then showing the screen in the background. And the students ended up preferring that much more than just watching the slideshow presentation. That was streamed to an online group, and negotiating with the students, closed Facebook group was the preferred option, where they could see that stream. And as I'll talk about in a second, there was a number of other streams being produced. So they wanted to be able to switch between streams dynamically during the lecture experience that they were participating in online to the face-to-face classroom. Of course, my ultimate aim is to have the face-to-face classroom and the online classroom being blended seamlessly. Now, we use the term blended a lot, but not really in a properly blended way. So the idea is that experiences for students online is almost exactly the same as the experience of students in the face-to-face space. Now, that opens up a lot of challenges, but I've been slowly working through those. The main one is being able to manage all the tech while you're doing the lecture. So the university wouldn't provide me with a teaching assistant, so I built my own and used a Neo robot to actually manage that process. Now, it wasn't particularly good yet at managing the interactions and the activities, so he actually presents the lecture while I run around managing the tech and the activities in the actual lecture space. And he just narrates the lecture slides and interacts with that process in that way. The other big aspect, though, for the students online is being able to participate in the group activities occurring in the lecture space. Now, the one big camera doesn't really provide that interactivity. So I've got a number of these one-click Mevo cameras. You just click on them and it streams to Facebook. And that then, having those out in the different groups, allows the participants online to get a video stream of what's occurring in the lecture space, in their little groups. With that, I also link that to the microphones, which are Bluetooth streaming, and they are paired with Mevo to an iPad, and I've got 6 of those set up, and have that as 6 streams going out to the Facebook page for each of the individual groups, so they can then participate online, but at the moment that's still only one way. So the streaming is coming from the lecture space to the students online. In the tutorial space, we've managed to achieve that more successfully. I'm experimenting with providing the iPads out to the lecture spaces, but that's not quite happening just yet. In the tutorial space, where we've got more time to manage this process, the students online using Google Hangouts and laptops are interacting with the student groups in a much more dynamic way. So all the discussion groups are happening where the online students are interacting with the face-to-face students in that online space, or in that blended online classroom space. But a lot of our activities are quite interactive and so forth. So one area where we're still using the venerable Second Life is to allow students in the online space and the face-to-face space to both enter a virtual space and interact around construction activities. Because I mostly teach in the IT and design and technology area, it's very practical based. And so that allows us to do some virtualized practical based activities. But we still want to do a lot of physical practical based activities. And that's where we come to the 3D video. Now, I've been using the Views 360. It costs 5% of our big brother here, but it provides 4K recording and HD streaming to the Facebook pages, and it's been working quite successfully, particularly when we're doing large, complex construction activities. The one that we're showing there is the students who are all building these flying contraptions. And then if you've got 30 flying contraptions moving around the class space and the students all running after them and trying to move them about, it becomes a very dynamic, interactive space that's quite enjoyable to look around at and explore different viewpoints. And a lot of our activities are based around that sort of concept, where the students are building things like bridges or various other contraptions, and being able to then look at all the different workstations or activity stations is an important part. And that's not capturable by a single viewpoint camera. But what has proved most successful is around discussion groups, where we pop the camera in the middle of a group of face-to-face, of on-campus students, and the off-campus students can then look at and see each of the individual students and interact with them via the streaming on Google Hangouts. And that's proven very successful, and we've loaned out a whole lot of the cheap cardboard VR headsets to them, and about 20% of them started using the VR cardboard headsets with them, and found that that was engaging even more for them to be able to interact with the students as though they were physically in the tutorial space with the physical students. So that's where we're at in terms of the VR at the moment. And through all of this process, I was very worried that we'd have a drop-off in students attending the face-to-face component. Of course, normally we used to see about a 90% attendance on the first week, dropping down to sort of 30 to 40% by the end of the 10 weeks or 10, 12 weeks of the course. At the moment, we're seeing the same 90% turning up for the first week, but only that dropping down to about 70% by the end. So whatever's happening in terms of the student engagement, they're not choosing to go and use the virtual space completely, but certainly those that are choosing to do the online interactions are finding it much more engaging, and they're being able to participate not just in the lectures, but also in the tutorial activities and experiences, which is the main challenge that I'm trying to overcome, which is sort of the big thing at the moment, particularly around the practical-based courses. That's it.
Thank you so much, Jason. Thanks, everyone. Oh, goodness. I would just like to know when I can get my robot. So that I
That's a whole other story.
focus on the rest of the ecology as well. Lots of hands up. Here we go. I'm coming to the closest first today.
Thanks very much, Jason. I'm wondering why you chose the Google Hangout platform, and if you had how you'd address the hurdle of students setting up their Google accounts to be able to use that platform.
Well, I've been using Google Hangouts for about 10 years before the university supported it. So because I found it at that time, it was the only thing that would allow up to 10 video streams at once. And now they have more video streams, but for many, many years, it was the only thing that was practical for multiple video streams from the students. And that was the main interactivity that I wanted to achieve. Then about 4 or 5 years ago now, the university went with Google, and all the students got Google accounts, and so it made it much, much easier. Now this year, they're moving away from that, and they're all losing their Google accounts, so I have to rethink whether or not moving to another platform is a better solution for students for that process. But for the last 5 years, it's been wonderful, where the students have all had their own Google accounts, and it's been a much more seamless process.
In the Google Hangouts, can they manipulate the 360-degree video, or is that done in Facebook?
No,
and then
I
they
haven't used the
communicate
360-degree video with the Google Hangouts. It doesn't stream to Google Hangouts. That's all been done with these ones and normal cameras.
Jason, yeah, it's an interesting use of the 360 video in that live classroom scenario, and you use a lot of it. So two things. One, were there issues with bandwidth in terms of breaking up? And the other thing, I suppose, from our institution is whenever we take cameras into a lecture room, we are warned about the levels of permission you need to get for students to film them. So how'd you get around those two particular issues?
Well, around the permission aspect, we've been going, that's where I negotiated with the students at the beginning, and the closed Facebook option was what they preferred. I had been using other options like closed YouTube channels and things like that, but the Facebook one was okay, and we haven't had any instances of anyone else getting into it or them sharing it outside beyond that. So that's proven to be a useful solution around that. In terms of bandwidth, that is a little bit of a challenge at times. You can wire them into the wall sockets, but you've got to then negotiate with permissions to get access to those wall socket points and all the rest, and that's often too much of a hassle. But in the main, you've still got a recording if it fails, but in the tutorial space, it hasn't proven too much of a problem because you've got, well, in my courses, I've got 2 hours, and if there are issues, I can normally resolve those within that period. And that hasn't been a problem. But there's also other streams of non-360 video happening that they can fall back on if the 360 video does slow down at that point.
Yep. Hi, Jason. Justin. I'm going to be helping a lot of academics over the next few months refresh their courses in AEL in preparation for the virtual learning environment.
Is the microphone working? Oh.
Is it on?
Oh, okay.
Come closer. Sorry, I'm going to be helping a lot of academics refresh their courses in preparation for the virtual learning environment here at Griffith. I'm tech savvy like yourself, and I'm excited about all this stuff, and I can see the benefit. what advice would you give to me to develop a communication strategy to bring on those who aren't as tech savvy when they need to be?
Yes, that's always a challenge. I predominantly teach teachers, so preparing them to use this sort of technology in the classroom is always a challenge. And I always caveat that what I tend to be doing is sort of on the edge, and that's not what they should be initially aiming at. Initially, I would say looking at non-360 degree streaming, because we don't do that particularly well at the moment. I think there's still a lot of movement we need to achieve in that space before we get to everyone using the 360 streaming option. Because streaming opens up a whole lot of challenges as with bandwidth and other aspects and protected environments and all those spaces. We're really good at putting in all the infrastructure to do the capture of the slides and the audio, and that's all in place, but supporting normal streaming would be the next step, I would say, and then beyond that, we'd then start looking at the 360 streaming. But we haven't really achieved the standard streaming across the university with everyone using that. So it's probably a bit of a step beyond to go to 360 straight away.
Thank you so much, Jason. Please put your hands together and thank Jason for us. Come on up, Thom. Dale will help you out there. Thanks, Thom. So next up on our agenda today, we're going to be welcoming Thom Cochrane. And Thom is joining us from Auckland University of Technology. And we're going to be talking designing immersive mobile mixed reality for paramedic education. And hasn't it been amazing today, actually, just to see how many applications in health there has been and how many examples there are out there that can help lead us to figure out how to actually incorporate that and facilitate other disciplines. I think there's probably a much larger base of resources that we could be looking at is the other thing, and examples. So I guess that's just an additional thought onto that last piece about where's the research live, where do the exemplars live, how do we access those? All right, Thom.
Okay.
Exciting. Now, I think you've actually got a few, colleagues from other institutions, but certainly sector colleagues here today. How many people here are actually in the health field? Just as a sample here. Yeah, one. Oh, I thought we had a few more than that, actually, because we've seen so many great examples. It's been amazing.
All right, I think I'm almost ready to go.
All right, Thom, we will let you rip. Thank you so much.
Okay, so this is basically a presentation I've done before, or a version of it at the conference last year, the IEEE teleconference, because, you know, why reinvent the wheel. This is the link to the presentation notes if you want to go and have a look and check out what we've done, because I won't be able to cover everything there, and you can flick through that if you like, find all the resources. There was a short link, tinyurl.com. It is case sensitive, IEEE Tele 2018, or you can scan the QR code. So I guess my history with AR, VR has really been focused around mobile. But 20 years ago, I was actually teaching music and audio engineering production. So it's great to hear something about audio, even though it's from the competitor SAE. But because that's the part that's always forgotten in particularly multimedia and AR and VR is the importance of audio, and it's always left to the last minute, and you just rip a track off a CD or something. So it'd be great to talk to you, Alicia. So we started by looking at QuickTime Virtual Reality Studio back in '98, which was fantastic, and then that died, and then we moved on to augmented reality with Wikitude sort of around '09 or so, particularly with architecture students, and then more recently with my new role at AUT. I'm an academic advisor. I work with lecturers, so I try to empower them to think about how they can make their learning experience for their students more authentic, more linked between the theory and practice, and AR and VR is one way to do that. And we focus on the mobile devices because of using a BYOD approach. All our students now own a smartphone. Or if they don't, they can partner with someone who does, because there's only 1 in 10 who doesn't if they don't own one. So recently we've been looking at 360 video, we've been looking at SeekBeak as a platform, Wanda VR, and a few of these tools which you might have heard throughout the day. And I work as part of a team really, so these are a couple of the lecturers that I work with. They're both paramedic lecturers, so great to see some of the stuff that Darryl's been doing. It's really exciting and very similar to some of the stuff that we've been doing, so I won't cover that too much. Claudio is more of a researcher into the development, so we have like a production team, and Claudio is the researcher for that, heads that up. And then we've been partnering with a couple of researchers in Chile, and their main focus has been on biometrics and using sensory data to back up subjective feedback from participants. So in our case, it's are students actually telling us that they're really being stressed in an environment, or are they just telling us fibs, and how do we prove that? And by using biometric data, we're doing that. So that's probably what I'll focus on, because that's a little bit different to what you've seen so far. So here's the team. Basically, it's a transdisciplinary team made of lecturers, academic advisors, which is myself, so we give the educational technology foundation and advice, so it's about the pedagogy, not about the technology, and the appropriate choice of technology. The mixed mode reality development team that's heads up by Claudio, he goes away and checks out the various tools for us and says, we recommend this one. Because really what we're about is either lecturers or students developing the content. We don't want to develop it for them, so we want tools that are really easy to use by the end user. So that's what we've chosen, and it has to be basically free or very low cost, because we can't afford to build a cave or, 7 CYO rooms or anything. So it's all got to be very, very low cost, and the end user has to be able to do it. And so we want students to be able to create stuff. Students aren't going to go and pay $100,000 to do a project. It's got to be free. And then we're linking with the biometric team in Chile. So these are kind of our research questions. How can we basically enhance what we're doing, enhance the learning experience to be much more authentic than what it currently is, and particularly, say, paramedicine as an example. So we're getting a lot of uptake in the health disciplines. We've got 7 different health disciplines. We're working with paramedicine, physiotherapy, and nursing currently. The other ones are all excited, but we're kind of holding them off because we just don't have the resources yet. And it's kind of like, well, at the moment, their simulation techniques are in a white-walled room with a 2-way mirror. They have a high-fidelity mannequin. I'm not allowed to call it a dummy because it costs $170,000 or something. So, and that's on the floor. They get told before they go into the simulation, this is a bus crash. The victim has these symptoms. Now go and demonstrate how you treat that. And there's their lecturers are sitting behind the 2-way mirror, watching, making notes, and throwing a few sort of tricky things out there, like some audio cues or asking questions. It's not really very authentic or very stressful, apart from they know they're being assessed. So how can we make that much more authentic? And then tying into how do we actually know that they're actually being stressed or not by biometric feedback. So I'm just going to switch here to the old iPhone. So this is linked in that paper that I've got on the Evernote, but it just comes up a little bit nicer on the iPhone. So give you an idea, we use a mobile VR headset, so we use like a Google Cardboard type of headset. We've also been using the Oculus Go just because it's slightly higher quality. We're not interested in tethered devices because we want them to be able to move around and also much lower cost. And then we have a sensor unit which is strapped onto them, and that has skin conductivity, heart rate, and something else which I can't remember right now. And we also, because we're using a CPEC environment, we can track where they're looking. So we get their gaze analysis and we get hotspot analysis. So we put hotspots in there. It gives us all the statistics in the background, what are students looking at, because we can't see what they're doing. But in fact, what we did with the trials was we video streamed from the headset to a monitor so we could actually see what they were, where they were and what they were engaging in. So just to give you an example, this is in Wanda VR, which is video version, but we did this, this is just for demo purposes because it's much easier to demo this way. We actually did most of it in CPEC, which is a bit more interactive. I'll just go into the handset version. So we have our logos of the teams. And then we flick first. This is the students are sitting with a headset on. First thing we do, I've just muted the audio because it just gets in the way, is they're sitting in a stream, this lovely New Zealand forest, you know, like the gum trees you have here. And it just calms them down. So for most of the students, the first time they had a headset on, they freak out. And this is just to calm them down so the biometrics settle down, and then it auto advances. They're inside an ambulance, and the ambulance starts up, rides, it's actually at night, and then a call comes through in the ambulance, so they can sort of look around the ambulance. For some of them, it might be the first time they've been in an ambulance, even though it's virtual, the call comes through, it's a heart attack, and the students start to freak out, and their blood pressure goes up because, okay, now I know I've got to deal with heart attack. This is pretty important, and I'm just going to zoom through the next one. So the ambulance ride takes a few minutes, as it would, but I'm just auto-advancing just for the sake of getting there. And then it takes them to the scene. So this is the scene they arrive at, and you can see it's actually one of our paramedic lecturers' garage, and he's a bit OCD, he's got a lot of stuff there. And you've got to explore that, find out what the issues are. Then it takes them into the sim room, and so the simulation room is laid out exactly like this. And so they get to see what they're going to see as they walk into the sim room. And on the CPEC, these are interactive. So as you mouse over them, things pop up, give them more information. And sometimes they freak out, oh, I'm standing on top of the body. So we might change that a little bit next time for the actual scene. And then they get a bit of verbal feedback, you know, what do you think, well, how are you going to treat this patient? Then they walk into the actual simulation room and do the simulation. So it's enhancing that simulation, trying to make it more authentic, trying to make it more real. And then we got feedback from the students and lined that up with our biometric data. And it's really interesting. So we had our group of, let's go on there, come back to here. So just to give you an idea of kind of what it was happening, we gave them a brief intro. There's a control room, they're on the headset, and when they take the headset off, it looks like they're actually at the entrance to the garage, so we try to make it as real as possible as we can. They're sitting on a chair, swiveling around, the sensors bolted on their hand. And what actually happened was after the third student, the sensor broke. A power supply cord broke off it, and it was a little bit more prototypey than we'd hoped. So in the future, what we're going to do is develop an app for the Apple Watch. And we think that has a lot of potential. We've got a lot of feedback from the students, which is really good. We had students, this is our first one, and that was really interesting because we wanted, if you saw the scene, there's a chainsaw going in the virtual scene. So we actually had in the sim room a chainsaw, and we powered it up before the students went up there into the scene. And so we thought the first thing they'd do is turn the chainsaw off. But the student went in there, the first student, and started, you know, pumping away on the mannequin and left the chainsaw going. The room filled up with smoke, and the fire brigade came and shut us down. And, you know, all the sprinklers turned on and everything. And we said, why didn't you turn the chainsaw off? And he said, well, I didn't know how. I've never seen one before, you know. So then we have a virtual chainsaw. But then the interesting thing was the number of students who didn't ask for the virtual chainsaw to be turned off. And so they're going, I can't hear you, because the dummy gives them feedback, and it's actually a lecturer for a microphone. And they go, oh, I couldn't quite hear you. You go, why didn't you turn the chainsaw off? So these are the kind of things that they need to learn. they need to make the environment safe, and by doing this sort of activity, hopefully it actually helps the learning process. I've kind of run out of time, but there you go.
Thank you so much for that, Tom. Really appreciate that. And really nice, I think, to see a bit of global perspective there on that sort of collaborative research that you're doing as well with Chile, and seeing that sort of global connections, and also the integration of data, I think, is wild.
And the importance of sound. That's really important. Yeah.
All right, we've got a question from the audience.
Thanks. I really love the biometric recording of how the student feels when the heart attack call comes in. Do you have any data on what an actual heart attack, like what an actual paramedic responding to an actual heart attack, what their biometrics do compared to the VR scenario?
Yeah, they actually calm down. So we actually had first, second and third year students, so we compared those, and we had working paramedics all doing the same simulation. What we found, the first year students completely freaked out, and some just started sweating all over because they'd never done it before. They didn't even know how to do the simulation. The second year students, their blood pressure went up. They were quite stressed. The third year students, not quite so much because they'd done it a few times. The working paramedics, they were really stressed putting the headset on because they'd never done that before. So their blood pressure went right up at the start. Put the headset on, they're in the ambulance, they start calming down. And when the call comes through, it's a heart attack, they calm right down because that's what they do every day. And it's like, oh, I know what I'm doing now. You know, this is just what I do. This is my job. So yeah, it was really interesting. Yeah.
Looks like we've all got different baselines, hey?
Yeah, definitely.
That's the proof of the pudding, isn't it? Look, I'm sure you'll get hit up for a lot of Q&A in the break as well. So please put your hands together and thank Tom for us. And I'd like to welcome up to the stage Charles Zhang. Come on up, Charles. Dale will assist you there. Now, Charles is joining us from Griffith University today, and Charles will be speaking to us about exploring VR film language. So we've had some really good presentations about sound. We've looked at the ways that data is being integrated into these simulations and learning experiences. We've looked at the ways emotion and empathy is having an impact on these sorts of things, and the way that actually people interact themselves with those VR experiences. And now we're taking another turn, another tack, and looking at the language themselves. So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to have the opportunity to share our experience in VR film production. The topic I want to talk about today is how zones of focusing might be used to replace the frames of traditional cinema. The history of cinema has been more than 100 years since Lumiere brothers present their first film, The Arrival of the Train, in French in 1895. Immersive drama Sleep No More developed the theory of environmental theater, which is based on audience experience and is similar to VR films. VR film is a change in the way of movie watching. Many experts believe that VR film breaks the fourth wall theory of drama. VR recreates a virtual space where viewers can interact with the environment, and the viewers need to wear headset to immerse themselves in a virtual space. In this space, the picture frame no longer exists. The relationship has changed between actors and viewers, while the audience is a part of this space. Last year, we shot the 70 minutes VR feature film Calling for academic research. My purpose is to explore the possibility of commercialized VR products and explore how to develop a cinematic language for VR filmmakers. The story is about a middle-aged man's emotional entanglement between reality and illusion. It screened in China last year, and it will be screening in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne in March this year as part of results of my research. Why I proposed the theory of focus zone. Due to no picture frames in VR, how to tell a story in 720-degree space is a challenge for VR filmmakers. The key question is how to get the audience to pay attention to the story plot points. Currently, there are 4 main theories to attract viewers' attention. The White proposed a core of focus theory, which divides storytelling action into 3 zones. Bray Hart proposed that points of interest are elements within an experience that attract a participant's attention. Goody pointed that the significant events related to the plots mainly occur within a 180-degree area of initial viewing direction. Serrano defined the regions of interest as the areas in the 360-degree frame where the action takes place. Although these methods all mentioned how to divide the space, they don't consider how the audience can find the POI when multiple POIs appear at the same time and don't involve the distance between VR camera and the objects. However, the zones of focusing I put forward can further refine the approach of space division, because positioning the distance between objects and cameras in space can effectively help directors design the relationship between main narration and micro narration, as well as improve the audience's sense of immersion. What is zone of focusing? Zone of focusing is different from other theories. It provides a more detailed method of space division. ZOF refers to the initial focus area of the audience. It's divided into 3 key areas: direct focus, split focus, and indirect focus. Direct focus area contains the main story elements and POIs. When 2 consecutive shots are connected, the editor can combine the 2 panoramic shots through aligning 2 direct focus areas, which will not only maintain the visual consistency of the storyline, but also shorten the time for the audience to search for POIs in VR space, and even avoid the vertigo for the audience. The split focus is an area of the audience peripheral vision. The field of vision of direct focus area and split focus area can reach 225 degrees in total. If the secondary story elements appear in the split focus area when multiple events happen at the same time, it can increase the sense of participation of the audience. The indirect focus is the blind area because this area is in the back of the head. So the events occurring in this area can't be observed directly. However, a blind spot is not entirely meaningless. Many plots and clues can happen in the blind spots. Shooting zones. Each gray area represents the distance between the object and the camera. They are close-up zone, middle zone, and long-shot zone. In this area, the director can design the distance between the story elements and the camera so that the actor can clearly know how to blocking in the space. How to apply ZOF? The director focus area is the first impression area of the audience, and the first POI should appear in this area. When the audience has satisfied their curiosity about the POI, they will take advantage of the rest of the time to look around the whole environment. The director expects this response because when the viewers search for environmental information, they will establish the spatial awareness of the scenes and try to find the story clues in the space. When they return to the area again, the audience is already familiar with the environment, and their curiosity about the situation will be weakened. Instead, they will have time to focus on the main plot of the story. Okay, the design of the panoramic shot should first satisfy the audience's first impression, which can be the main plot point in the focus area. It may be a scene, a character, or an action, or even an object. Further, the panoramic shot should leave the audience a period to understand the whole space or interact with the environment briefly before further plot points are presented. Besides, my research also involves how to apply traditional film editing methods in VR film production and how to design the density of spatial narration in ZOF to improve the audience's sense of immersion. That's all. Thank you. I have a 1 minute trailer can show you. This is the 2D version. because I have a VR version, but I think it doesn't work here. Okay, thank you.
How fascinating to be talking about focal points because, yeah, as far as we go across VR, 360, we're talking points of interest all the way to how do we actually identify with the characters in these new realms. So fascinating, can't wait to see what you produce for your PhD.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions for Charles? No? I think we're going to need more than 10 minutes to look at focus zones. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Please put your hands together and thank Charles for joining us today. Thank you. All right, lucky last, and we don't know why we've done it to Jane 2 days in a row, but she's a star. So last up in our quickfire session today is the lovely Jane Frost from University of Canberra. And Jane is going to be sharing a little bit more empathy with us today in the promotion of such good through immersive video. Please join me in welcoming Jane. And Jane, let's get you tagged up. Won't be a second. Excuse me, Charles. Can I just grab that microphone?
Sorry.
I do it through interpretive dance if we were being videos. We're not through live stream. It's okay. I pause stream, like this was a free event, right? It's okay. Jane. There you go.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Nice. So hi, I'm Jane Frost from the University of Canberra. Again, my presentation is more about the implementation and the use of the technology rather than developing it, although we have moved into developing some of these videos. We had a talk yesterday that talked about empathy and whether or not VR was the way to promote empathy. So I do a lot of work with empathy. I'm an academic in nursing, and empathy is really important for our students. So I'm going to use these quotes from To Kill a Mockingbird about empathy. So you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside his skin and walk around in it. And I guess another thing to think about is people generally see what they look for and hear what they listen for. So I think that 360 video can help us to allow students to walk in the shoes of others, but also to, through prompting, get them to look at things that they probably weren't looking for, because they can re-watch videos if they wanted to. So why is empathy important? It's really important in nursing, in healthcare in general, because compassionate care, understanding and empathy improve health outcomes in patients. So it's the understanding and the empathy that I use 360 video for. And it's a really low-tech version of 360. There's been some fantastic presentations today, and I'm going, oh wow, I didn't even know you could even do that with 360 video and that you could be interactive and things. This is using the cheap headsets with the, so we did try Google Cardboard, but we found that they weren't very robust for a lot of students. But you can buy these kind of plastic ones, which are really good to have in a classroom. So we can use, like, we've got 25 of these so that we can take them to a tutorial room. We can have everybody using these at the same time and going through an immersive experience. The only thing that I would say is that sometimes the bring your own device, that's great, but people have a variety of different mobile phones and capabilities of them. So sometimes we come across a few issues. So I usually try and have my phone all set up to be able to just slip that into, you know, so that other people can have a go at the same time. So experiential learning is what I use in my work. So I use a lot of different experiences. And I thought that it was interesting to share this with you because we do, in one particular unit, we do several experiences that aren't 360 video and several experiences that are. 360 video on YouTube, you can actually get quite a few experiences that are free, that are easily accessible. For example, Dementia UK have developed 3 different immersive experiences about being a person with dementia. So the experiences that I use are all filmed from the first person. So you are the patient and you are seeing what it is like in that, from that perspective. So a walk through dementia, when you put the headset on, you are walking down the street and it is talking to you about what the person is thinking at the same time. And at one point there is a puddle on the floor and you just think that you would just walk through it, but actually she thinks she's going to drown if she goes near to this puddle, and her anxiety raises. And what I wanted to share with you was the fact that students really engage with this. So we have other experiences where they wear physical suits. We also have experiences where they may wear, so one of the things I ask my students to do is wear a colostomy bag, and I fill it with fake poo, because I'm a nurse and I like doing things like that. And I get them to go around for 24 hours and see what it's like to have a colostomy bag. Great learning, all using the experiential learning, and I've put up Kolb's learning cycle because I've actually now moved it to an assessment so that they are exposed to about 6 or 7 different experiences, and they choose the one that relates to them the most. And they write their assignment based on what happened and how they would actually, why that's going to change them as a nurse, how they're going to put that into practice, whatever they've learned. And the things that we found are that the dementia one, particularly, I've got students who have looked after people in aged care facilities who have watched this, this video and gone, oh, I never realised how debilitating it was or how much anxiety there was around certain things, and it's really changed the way that they are in practice. This is one that, so we at the University of Canberra have actually developed a stroke 360 video, which is from the perspective of a patient who has had a stroke. Unfortunately, I can't show you that today, but the student said, having watched this video, I feel I have a much bigger insight into how a stroke victim feels in hospital, allowing me to have more compassion and empathy towards these patients. I have learned that attitudes like patience make such a difference to the patient in the bed that's having a really bad day. So quotes like this from students really make me think, believe, that actually 360 video can promote empathy, or at least understanding in students. We don't know how long that lasts, and perhaps we need to do some more longitudinal studies about how often they need to do these experiences so that we can see how long that effect is. But certainly from doing VR, and because I have 3 different experiences, so there is a cultural awareness simulation that has been developed in nursing. I don't want to attribute it to the wrong university, but Professor Tracy Levitt-Jones has developed the cultural awareness one. We use that, we use the dementia one, we also use the stroke one that's been developed at UC. All of those, the students aren't getting bored after 3 different experiences, but I must say that I use different things in between so that they're not having a VR headset every week. And so that's what I've found with the students. And it's really easy to use because you can, and scalable because you can just use these headsets. Okay, so there's some references there. Okay. No, those are just the references at the end.
My goodness, there's so much actually to take out of that. In fact, when you started with the quotes, I was quite intrigued because one of the affordances of marking up or providing those points of interest that Charles was actually taking us through and points of focus is actually the ability to seek what you want to hear, what you want to know, what you need to find. So that was fascinating. And the idea that the way that you deploy it, you're actually giving your students choice as well, which linked me back to actually Lee Allen Potter's presentation yesterday, in which she talked about motivation and empathy. So because you're actually giving them a bit of choice up front, chances are their motivation's a bit stronger, and chances are they're going to feel more empathetic when they get there. So fascinating links between them. Any questions for Jane? So much to ponder. No? All right.
Lunchtime.
Wow. Well, you can catch Jane later when we have our experiences. So for now, I would like to probably say sayonara, everybody. Say goodbye to the live stream on YouTube. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for joining us at A New Reality. We'll be hosting a lot of these recordings on the ACODE site within the next week or so, and resources, so please go there if you haven't checked out ACODE and you are an Australasian educational provider, worth looking at. Thank